nice to see you show up too. Come on in, have a seat. We're going to get started pretty quickly. I've been told that it starts recording at 6:30. Welcome, welcome. Wonderful. That's great. All right. So welcome and thank you so much for attending the first of the Paxton, Mass. Garden Club's Fall 2023 seminar series. I'm Sarah Root-Simone. I'm the PMAGC president, and here's Robin Tasca, our VP, our VIP really. I want to take a moment to thank Chief Savasta for the opportunity to use the Paxton Safety Complex for this event, both because of the availability of the technology and because of the cooler environment. I think we're all happy for it tonight. We're also thankful to Scott Wilson of the Paxton Cable Committee for helping us to record and to live stream this event to those who could not come tonight. So now please allow me to introduce this evening's guest speaker. In the world of horticulture and gardening, it is often said that knowledge blooms like a well-tended garden. And tonight's speaker embodies that sentiment perfectly. With a passion for all things green and a wealth of expertise in the world of plants, our guest is sure to leave us all inspired and informed. Our guest speaker this evening is Roger McGaughey, who brings with him a lifetime of experience in the art and science of gardening. For over 50 years, he's been an expert in professional growing, integrated pest management, and has shared his knowledge with audiences in regular column articles featured in professional journals like Greenhouse Grower and Grower Talks. But it's not just about the accolades, and I know Roger doesn't love that, the humble guy that he is. It's also about the genuine love for cultivating the earth and the boundless enthusiasm that Roger brings to every gardening endeavor. We're thankful that Roger has joined the club and through his own sense of community has designed and beautified many of Paxton's most public spaces and is willing to share his experiences with us. Tonight, Roger will take us on a journey to learn why fall is one of the best times to plant. We're going to learn some of the basics of creating a new garden bed with some of Roger's tried and true gardening tips and see some of his process of ideation, planning, and installing the gardens here at the Paxton Safety Complex in the Town Common. He'll offer us insights, tips, and perhaps even a few secrets to make our own gardens flourish like never before. So, without further ado, let us warmly welcome our garden guru, Roger McGaughey, and prepare to be captivated by his wisdom, passion, and green thumb magic. Please join me with a heartfelt Garden Club welcome.
Good evening, everybody. I don't know that I can live up to all of that, but anyhow, we'll give it a go. So, thank you all for coming. It's a novel experience. The Garden Club is more than in its infancy. We've got over 100 members now. So anybody who is not a member, wants to become a member, Karen outside will be happy to sign you up. And during the course of the evening, I'm going to mention the word volunteer a number of times because we need volunteers all over the place for various different operations and activities and so on and so forth. So if you're not a volunteer, you'll be one before you leave the room. So without further ado, I got this first slide here from one of the trade presses, Green Garden. And if you notice, people who garden, men 85%, women 88%, you're in the lead, okay? Things that trouble gardeners, 87% overwater plants and kill them, 60% forget to water, I know those people, and 52% blame lack of knowledge. Hopefully, I might improve that knowledge a little bit tonight, but we'll see how it goes. Would garden if they had more room? 61%. Some of us fall into that category. I for one do, because when I run out of my own garden to work with, then I want to move on to somewhere else. And happily, a couple of years ago, the Town Board of Selectmen agreed that we tackle the Common and a few other places. So things have gone from there. And then other people have joined the club, and we've beautified those areas. So, bit of background. I got my love of gardening from my mother. I grew up in a small market garden in Market Hill, Northern Ireland. Went through Reading University. I've had gardens all through my my life. My better half, for better or worse, Ellen has been with me all the way along. She's not a gardener, self-professed, but she helps me enjoy it and bears with me. I keep telling her, I've told her for many years, working with perennials you just plant in the garden and forget about them. Wrong. She's also moved a lot of perennials around in the last couple of weeks, trying to help me come up with this slide presentation, so thank you for that. So perennials on the move, perennials for fall gardening, whatever. So we arrived in Paxton, for better or worse, in about 2015. We moved up from Connecticut, and lo and behold, we ended up purchasing a property here in Paxton. These first few slides are some of what the house was that we arrived in. This was before. Can you go back one, please? Look at that maple tree, because that's a sad story. That big maple tree, you'll see how things have developed along the line. But we had, the house was being refurbished, and they put in a septic system. And unfortunately, I believe that tree succumbed to damaged roots, and well, you'll see what happens later. So this was the property, overgrown, in very much disrepair. Before we moved in, that was the front by the road. Again, that area. You'll notice all the pink flags. I love flags. They help me make a plan, because if you don't plan, you plan to fail. So you follow things and go from there. So while the work was being done before we actually purchased the property, Bob DeRosa was doing the work, putting in the septic system and doing the garden. So I got to know Bob, real nice guy, and said to him that I was really wanting to try to create some flower beds and so on, but it would be a bit of a waste of his time and money if he put seed down where I was going to dig it all up. So he said, mark out what you want, that's less for me to seed. So that's exactly what we did. So that's him having seeded, and round there and through the trees, that was the start of the bed. Now, you got to go with, you play the cards you're dealt. Anybody who plays bridge or any other games and so on, if you don't get good cards, you don't win. But so it's going to be a shady garden. You have to have a vision. You have to have some idea of what you sort of might want. You can't plant flowers or perennials, any sort of flowers in the back underneath the shade that requires a lot of sun, because it ain't going to happen. So next one, please. Preparation is key. Absolutely 100% key. So it's really important that you prepare the soil properly. Time well spent, because you're putting perennials in, and perennials you just put in and you leave and you don't have to touch them. remember? So they're going to be there for a long while. So if they're not taken care of properly, you don't bring your kids up and throw them out with the dishwasher or dishwater. You look after them, but you've got to make sure roots are good and there's good substance to the soil. So I spent some time doing this. We moved in early November. Luckily that year, the weather was absolutely fantastic. It was actually 70 degrees on Christmas Day, and I was still planting, although some of my neighbors said, "Do you really know what you're doing?" But I was still planting on the 6th of January. 8th of January, my daughter's birthday, lo and behold, the first snow came. But anyhow, so there we go. So where did I get my plant material from? We brought it up. We knew we were going to move. So I planted a lot of mixed pots in Connecticut where we were, and put them all together, rented a van, brought them up, and lo and behold, my sister-in-law lives in Worcester, and she had a nice driveway, so I had a nice little nursery bed for things to be looked after. So they were there for 2 or 3 months, and then we actually moved in, so rented another truck and brought them up and laid them out and started the transplant process, ground having been prepared first. So laid out a sheet of plastic on the nice new lawn, broke things up, separated them out, decided sort of what I wanted to go where, and lo and behold, it started. Now when you're planting, and you'll see later on with some of the other exercises that we've taken care of, you need a hole that's big enough. Probably a hole, if you're planting a gallon pot, for instance, you need a hole 2 gallon size, because the soil needs to be loosened up, because the roots have to have somewhere to grow into. So everything's taken care of. And then the poor plants, if they're lucky and you're a nice person, you actually water them in afterwards. Ideally, some of the material you really want to water first of all. You can stick a gallon pot in a bucket full of water, leave it for 10 or 15 minutes and let it get fully saturated, and then take it out and plant it. So it's all ready to go. But you water it in afterwards and settle it in. So another bed. This was close to the 6th of January. So there's an assortment of things. I love heuchera. They're coral bells. They give you differences in color. If you look at my garden now, which you will do shortly, you'll see that some of those plants aren't in those positions anymore because we moved on. So we went away for one weekend, I think to visit my daughter, and came back. The weather had turned nastily. It was really, really cold. That ground was absolutely frozen solid. We're bird lovers. And on that shepherd's crook that's bent, there was a bird feeder, which wasn't there any longer because it disappeared into the woods, and that was our first bear experience. So there are some stones. Well, there's lots of stones in New England. Some people have more stones than others in their yard. That big stone on the right-hand side there, it never got moved because it was too big. Some people in the audience might be moving things like that, but not me. So we back onto Worcester Land Trust. Our property extends into the back a little bit. It's nice and easy to get rid of the leaves, and we can use this to our benefit for making compost and so later. So progression, you remember that, the look of that, what it was before we moved in. It's beginning to take shape, and it was time to get out the mower and sort of actually clean stuff up and put them in a big big compost bag and drag them into the woods and start making mulch and so on and so forth for later. So then we start on the front. That between the crate and our big windows there at the front, that really never gets water, even if it rains. The grass here at the front, on the right-hand side of the pathway, doesn't really grow. So that I thought, well, okay, I'll create a bed out of that as well and make life easy for ourselves. So heuchera ready to go. So we planted those, and then I've got a couple of other pots ready in position to plant something else. So other flags are down because I wanted to put something else in there. So this is a year and a bit on, a little pathway because our oil filler tank is in the corner, so be nice to the guy who's delivering our oil. And our pathway, so that is beginning to take shape. And in there as well, I ended up putting a soaker hose, and we'll come on to soaker hoses shortly. So, next one. This is a winter scene, a little bit sort of few years on. Plants are beginning to think about taking shape, beginning to break out from their winter dormancy. Again, a few more years on. Here you've got dicentra that are beginning to develop, and some heuchera. You got the different colors, and surprising how things develop and they survive through the winter. That area, in actual fact, the water tends to run from our neighbours down into there, and there's icicles, stalactites in the ground. It's absolutely, totally, completely frozen. But there's the heuchera beginning to actually sort of just appear, come into growth. Next one. Same again, different colors. My daughter and Ellen were in the garden one day, sort of just this last winter, and they both said sort of almost simultaneously, it's amazing how the garden will develop from apparently nothing. But you have to have faith, you have to be patient, and things actually do start to happen. So early on in the spring, you get a nice cloudy, misty day, but beginning to have assortment of plants round our deck, round our patio, and plants are beginning to grow and fill out. So that's up round where I had the bed up round just the front. This is where the bear damaged the pole. So we sort of make it nice little curves and change in colors and so on and so forth. And as time goes on, you put stuff in and, well, that doesn't really go there, so I'll move it, you know. But remember, you put them in and it stays where they are. So the grass is difficult to grow in the back, but right now it's looking really very nice, and it's nice and shady. So we got different colors and so on, and if I don't like it this year, well, I'll turn around and move it next year. So springtime, change in scene. We want to possibly get some early plants, so get some pansies and make some planters. This is sort of early spring. There's an assortment there. There's a dicentra here in the left, some calabrachoa hanging up, some other heuchera still be mixed in. Mix them up. It doesn't matter, you know. Play around. See what works. And you can always do like I did at the beginning, break them up and put them into the garden wherever you want. So we've got an assortment of color, different baskets in those rail troughs. There's some salvias and veronicas and lobelia and alyssum, lobularia, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But we sit on our deck and enjoy the scenery. So we went to England 2015 or 16, and our good grower friends over there, they had some raspberries in their garden. So a certain person came back and said, wouldn't it be nice if we had some raspberries? So I proceeded to get 18 plants of different early, mid-season and late, and we created a couple of raspberry rows on one side of the garden. So that's looking across the raspberries and through into the early summer, and enjoying life on the deck and just enjoying the scenery. The bees love the raspberries too. So at the front where we had our septic system put in, there was a candy cane right in the middle of the yard. Doesn't belong there, but it can't be moved. So what do? You create a bed and cover it up. So I got some flowering almonds from my sister-in-law's garden, planted them round the candy cane. So anybody who wants to point out the candy cane, feel free, but it's fairly well obliterated. So create another area. That bed has got a soaker hose as well, because it's easier to water it that way. So that develops, and you'll see how that develops later. So at the back, you remember that old scrub that was there that, you know, was absolutely terrible? Well, with a little bit of work and effort and so on and so forth, that's what it turns into. I've got no qualms about visiting other people's gardens and saying, I would like some of that. Can you share that with me? And we're all the same. We just have to actually verbalize it. So luckily, having worked for Pioneer Gardens for the last number of years and grown a lot of perennial plugs, there's odd spare perennial plugs and, you know, heuchera and other things, geum in the front, that we can get. At one stage, about a year ago, all the plants in my garden came from somewhere else. Not bought. The only plants that I actually bought were 7 azaleas. Those are 2 that were in pride of place in that bed. Unfortunately, this year azaleas didn't flower, but that was because of the weather. So we ring the changes. In the front, there's forget-me-nuts. They seed like crazy, and you can just use those to spread things around and give you sort of various different shades of color. So every so often we have to mow the grass, but as long as you don't having just recently applied fertilizer with weed killer attached to it, you can use that grass to make your compost. So waste not, want not, get nutrient back into the garden eventually. So we cut the grass. Ellen loves cutting the grass. So the lawn's beginning to take shape and the trees are filling out. So everything in the garden is rosy, as they say. That's another view. This over in this corner was the last bed that I made. I call this sort of my nursery bed. It was, you know, the 61%, you move on to something else. So this is a very much a sort of hodgepodge. Just use it as somewhere to transplant stuff, and we'll move it later. So that has now filled in, and that works too. So we come back to our maple tree. We had some tree work done, and I had thought about this anyhow. I'll make a bed underneath this maple tree, and the arborist who came to do some tree work said, you know, the trees really benefit from having something underneath them rather than just grass, because it helps the root systems and so on and so forth. So this is how that bed looked. A lot of shade plant material. There's geraniums in the front because they get sort of a lot of morning sun, but there's a lot of ferns and heuchera and so on, and coral bells in there, astilbe. So the tree is not looking ever so happy. So we have to think about what we do next. So that was it. In the early years, beautiful. We all know red maples. They're lovely. Create a lot of leaves, but that's all right. That's fun. Cleaning the leaves up. Use them to make compost. So that's another look at that back bed with the azaleas. Different shapes, different sizes, different flowering times, but it's all, you're getting the benefit of all your preparation work. Don't just dig half a hole and shove the plant in and expect it to survive. It ain't going to happen. So another view of the garden. I just like going round. I take far too many pictures probably, but you can always delete them, can't you? Maybe never do. But the maple tree's still there. It's looking not too happy. Sitting on our deck, we see a lot of hummingbirds. You'll see them shortly. They fly around, and there's a little branch up on the top that they would sit where there's no leaves on, or they sort of sit in other places. But so that was that. Another view, just basically sort of up the street, that was taken at sunset. Yeah, the sun is setting over here. But different colors. Is it right? Do I want to change it next year? Who knows? So, again, my nursery bed is beginning to sort of to fill up somewhat. The garden's sort of full, colorful. We can enjoy it. Different colors, different shapes. If you can really look at those plants, the astilbe, and that, we call them 4 o'clocks, the ornithea, in the front. They're nice and green and healthy looking. If a plant is nice, has got nice shiny leaves, and it sort of looks at you, and you can almost see your face in the leaves, you know it's happy. So it really sort of stands out. So we'll talk about fertilizer in a minute. But that's the early sort of stage of the astilbe. And then we'll have breakfast on the deck or whatever. That's one of the new varieties of salvia. It gets bigger, and the hummingbirds love it. We can grow some lantana. We've got the pansies or the violas are beginning to sort of to grow up a little bit. But we can enjoy that area quite nicely. So every now and again, I take a rest. Not often enough, but my son and daughter-in-law and grandson bought me a hammock for my birthday a couple of years ago. And believe me, in the shade, it's quite enjoyable. And you just sit there and you watch the birds, you watch the butterflies, you watch the hummingbirds. Maybe I don't stay there long enough, but you know, because I always want to do something else. So, in the wintertime, we enjoy the birds as they come along. I was really amazed a couple of years ago when we had these bluebirds. Somebody else has seen bluebirds as well, and I think there's a picture in the new calendar, Garden Club calendar. So, next one. And we've got Baltimore Orioles a couple of years ago for the first time. Now, you got to watch very quickly or very carefully in the next couple of slides, because not only did the male come, but the female came. And like any good male, he looks after his spouse. And thank you. Wow. Give him some food. So that was an enjoyable exercise. Didn't last long, but yeah, it was one of those things that here's the garden, and you've spent all the time trying to make it beautiful, and you enjoy basically nature in the process. So we also have hummingbirds. Ellen keeps track of hummingbirds when they come and when they leave. And surprisingly, they arrive within 2 or 3 days. A few heads nodding in the audience, yeah. They arrive about the same time every year. You keep waiting, will I put the feeders out, or will I wait and see them first, or whatever. But they come, and they have a ball. So there's one at the salvia, which is now grown up, and they'll just go round this salvia and just sit and enjoy. We're sitting on the deck in our chairs, and the plant is right there.
It's like a Disney movie. I've seen it. It's really truly like a Disney movie.
So not only do they enjoy the salvia, they enjoy other plants as well. Sorry that this is so small, but they're on the move. We had 8 or 10 hummingbirds one day flying all over the place, and you sit there and they zoom at you and they sort of come up and they flutter and they rest on their perches, and they're all over the place. So one of the benefits of creating a nice environment. So then the 61% of me said, I need somewhere else to go. Board of Selectmen agreed, because without being too hard and crude about it, the Paxton Common looked terrible. It was boring. When you go to other places and you'll see some more shortly, what can be done. So let's brighten the place up. So they were more than happy that we did. And with Travis Tebow, the head of the maintenance department, he's been a godsend. He's been a big help. He supplied us with compost, which is available out near the cemetery in a pile, but it's watched by security cameras, so everybody can have some, but you got to be careful and do the right thing as a civic-minded people, as we all are. So again, my flags, make a plan. How is it going to be? So pretty much a sunny spot, but as time develops, some of it gets more sun than others, and even the same plant in different areas respond differently. So what used to happen was they applied mulch every year, and I mean every year. So in there's about 8 inches deep of mulch before you come to weed mat, before you come to soil underneath. So you got to do your preparation work, dig out the mulch, dig down, cut the weed mat up, dig in underneath, put in your compost, and then you can start to plant. So that was stage 1. Stage 2, a little bit more. So various different holes all set. So where did the plant material come from? Well, because you look after your own garden and you get things to grow, they can be divided and split and separated and moved. So we filled that up, and lo and behold, a year later, it begins to look like this. So hopefully people are beginning to enjoy it. We put up some pots up there as well, which was a good thing and a bad thing. Number one, it created a lot of work. Number two, it was creating more plant material to be put somewhere else, but it also added some color. As luck would have it, or not have it, as the case may be, this first year of activity growing in the common was one of the drought years. A year ago, when we almost didn't have any water at all. So we talked about volunteers. We have a good watering crew from some of our members. So anybody who wants to learn how to water, and you remember about the 52% said we lacking knowledge and so on of how to water, we'll train you how to water. More than happy to train you how to water. So spread the joy, and then we go from there. So I mentioned before, underneath our tree, the arborist said it's better to have a bed underneath your tree with some plants in it because it's better for the roots of the tree. I really believe him. From a horticultural standpoint, he's right. So somewhere else I can plant. So we created another bed round the tree. Things will grow. The grass is cut, and what's wrong with the mower? The mower's on its side because it's been cleaned after cutting grass, so it's all ready for the next time. So your preparation work. We also try to check our rain gauge to see how much water we get. That bed is really filling out. Where's the candy cane? Where's Waldo? Candy cane's not visible. That's good. So different varieties. The lilies, that was their second year there. They got moved this year because you take the bulbs up and you transport them somewhere else. That's another view of that bed. Probably too much there, really. So it can be moved. So we can be split. It can be split up, and we put it somewhere else. Make some more planters for your patio. That heuchera, yellow variety, it's guacamole. It doesn't like the sun at all. The leaves go burned. So I put 4 little plants of ajuga, and lo and behold, the ajuga take over too because the roots are happy and the roots are healthy. But I think the color contrast is quite nice. That's a Brunner, a Jack Frost in the front, and then a pink Astilbe, and a trailing plant in the front, Vinca vine. So that's another pot. So where will that go next year? Somewhere else. Maybe even up here. Who knows? So different variety of salvia. Friend up in Whately, up near Deerfield, where I work, has a greenhouse, and he is a fantastic grower. He listens. He does things right. He produces really good quality stuff. And this year we tried a different salvia, a couple of different salvias, and it works. So you've got different varieties. I got a Weigelia from one of the members, Nancy McBride, because it wasn't doing very well in her place. We fed it. We'll get on to feeding in a minute or two. And it's now sort of filled in that corner. And we had 5 flowers first year through. So Is it beginning to be a bit of a jungle? Maybe, but it's okay. But the sad news was that we had to take the maple tree down because it really was dying and it was beginning to get dangerous. So we decided we'd put a couple of dogwoods, a white one in this corner and a pink one over on the other side. Where was the maple tree? The salvia in the top right-hand corner is in a pot sitting on, thank you, Sarah, sitting on the stump that we left in there. Ellen's first thought was, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. And I said, just wait, because I've got ferns planted round it and things will grow up. And I put some trailing petunias in there as well. So you can mix annuals with perennials to give you color. So you don't really notice where the stump was. But because the tree isn't there, what's happened? I've changed the whole landscape, the whole environment, so it's now not a shade bed, it's a sunny bed. So I had to reconfigure the whole thing, move stuff around in there as well, because I know I don't want to lose the plants. I put a soaker hose. One big soaker hose with bits and pieces of joiners like we've got on the common and a few other areas. I feed it from the bottom and from the top from 2 different spigots, and it works. So we've had a lot of rain, but it'll dry out fairly well. But the way to test it is dig down a little bit. This is a good tool. Love it, cultivator. Dig down a little bit and see what's underneath, and decide how much you want to water. So, but the various different plants in there from a different viewpoint. Next. You see all the beds are beginning to sort of to fill out. We've got different shapes of color. Do I like all the colors in the various different places that they are? Maybe. Maybe need to move something around. I took some astilbe this year and dug some of them up and chopped off bits and planted them up for the garden sale. I got asked the question, do you know what color they are? I said, no, because I did it when the flowers had gone, and I can't remember. Did I go back and check the photographs? Did I know where they came from? No. So this year, I've got little labels stuck in the back of the plants. I don't want labels all the way around my garden. Well, you're not going to see them. Don't worry, they're in at the back. So at least now, when it comes wintertime, we'll know that that's a pink, that's a salmon, that's a red, whatever. So we'll go from there. So hopefully anybody who purchased a astilbe at the plant sale, you're happy. So if you notice in that picture as well, we've got our hummingbird feeder there beside the salvia, and I've got 3 rain barrels all interlinked. So when it rains heavily, I can capture about 150 gallons of water, and then they overflow. So I don't know how many times I've actually emptied those this year, but certainly you save water because of it. Sorry, back up one, please. The lilies, 2 big blocks of red lilies there. Remember where they came from? The other bed from last year. So spread the joy. Different colors. Joan Larcy helped me this year. How do you keep mildew off your phlox? Well, I spray them with this systemic insecticide, mildewcide earlier on, and it works. So you see, we as garden club members, we share. Our white dogwood is beginning to take off. They were, it's two-tone leaves, as the pink one is the other side. They were bought as 3-gallon pots. You know what size a 3-gallon pot is? About this size. You know the whole size that I made for those? It was this size. So you've got to make it big enough. So after the rest of Paxton was beginning to look nice, the police chief and the fire chief came and approached the garden club and said, "What can you do for us? Because we look terrible." So we had a meeting one night with the chief of police and the chief of the fire brigade, and we started preparing an area outside for them. So again, flags, making holes, got some perennials. I had to go and buy them because it was the wrong time of the year, but if you want instant color, well, you have to do. So that the plants didn't get under stress, and none of us like stress. At that particular time, there was no immediate source of water. So rain barrels to the rescue, 2.5 gallon jug to the rescue as well. So that's what I used to transport my water from home to water the plants in when we're done. Remember I talked about roots. Some of these plants came from Pioneer. Some of these plants came from Greenhouse in Connecticut. Some plants came from House. They donated a lot of stuff, really pleasant. And so the root systems are great. You notice my spade. This is a garden spade. A round shovel doesn't work. This is like me. Well, it's about 50 years old, this, brought from England. Works, and it splits stuff up, and it's very nice and easy to work with. So that's how I dig my holes. Roots. In the industry, people categorize me as Mr. White Root because I was a white root fink. The white roots are healthy roots, and stuff is going to grow properly. So you want to take care of it. So dig the hole, plant the empty pot. Nice and simple. Plant the empty pot. Then put a little bit of water around it so that it's nice and moist. Take the pot out. Plant the other pot back in. So it works. So you just basically drop the pot in. Now you notice that's a coreopsis that I purchased. What's wrong with that plant before I planted? It's dry. You can tell by the color of the soil. So that pot got dunked in a bucket for 5 or 10 minutes so that the soil was all nicely brown, dark brown, and then it starts off right. Otherwise, the plant is under stress and it's not going to root in properly. Another good root system, white and healthy. I used to get told off many years ago, going into greenhouse, into nurseries and so on, trying to buy plants, and I would take the plant out of the pot. What are you doing? Well, I'm trying to find out if the roots are healthy because I don't want to buy a bad plant. So anyhow, check your roots, make sure it's healthy before you plant it, because you've spent a lot of time and effort into this, and you want to make sure that it's right. But if the plant is good and healthy at the top, it must have decent roots. So these are sun patients, new varieties, not New Guinean patients. They actually can take the sun. Again, what do you notice in the bottom right-hand corner? Nice white roots. So those can be transplanted as well. But because they are as they are, they may need a little bit more love and care and attention because they'll use a lot of water, these plants. So you need to have maybe extra hand watering as well as the soaker hose that we've got in there. So outside the safety building here, this is beginning to take shape. Holes dug, and I'd about exhausted my supplies, so we went down to House and asked them for some plant material. What can we buy? Take what you want. It's all for a good cause. So that was brilliant. They were wonderful about that. So buy your plants from House. So next one, please. So here we come to some of the enjoyment that we get from in the garden. We recently went out to Michigan to visit our sons. Met up with our daughter out there as well and got together for the first time for about 4 or 5 years. We walked down by the river down central Detroit, and I saw this little fancy sign and thought, that's wonderful, maybe. And Robin's first comment when she saw that was, oh, maybe we could have one like that on the common as well. Because if we don't look after our kids and get them involved in the gardening exercise, where are we going to be? Well, we probably won't be around to worry about it, but we want them to enjoy it. So, you know, at the bottom, fun facts about the bees, and then just for the kids, you know, can they do this, can they do that? So we then enjoy our bees, and they're all over the place. That's on a geranium roseanne, and the salvia on our deck. So we sit having breakfast and count the bees flying around. They're all over the place. Different types of bees. Bumblebees with big heavy pollen sacs. They're all over the place. They enjoy them. They're again on the roseanne. That's on an echinacea. Back one, I think, Robin, please. Back. There you go. That is a fall aster in that bed out in the front with the candy cane. That 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 I can count right here. They're all over the place, buzzing around, beautiful. On an echinacea, on a tansy. Look at the brown pollen sac. They're just all over the place. Next one. You could spend all day just watching these things. Outside the building here. It's amazing what you see when you actually stop and take a look. That I give anybody a lot of money if you can find a bee in there. They're actually, I couldn't see any, but the reason that I just like that picture, that's our dogwood, pink dogwood beginning to grow fairly well. That's a salvia in the front, and the bees love that too. So they're all over the place. And lo and behold, outside the front here, Dusty Miller is, I thought, due to my ignorance, I thought it was just a variegated, colourful plant that you put in for toning and so on and so forth. Yes, it does flower, but in all my life, I'd never actually seen a flower. So I was amazed one day when we come back from Michigan and walked round there, and lo and behold, the bees love it. And it's outside if you want to see. And then there's the butterflies. love the butterflies. We sit on the deck, and the butterflies love lantana. They fly around, swallowtail butterflies. Yep. And they love the asters as well. That's a monarch butterfly. They're all over. The other day, I noticed a swallowtail butterfly, and I ran round the garden after him because he moved from this plant to that plant. Those are anemones. He then moved on the hosta, because not an awful lot of attraction on the hosta, but he probably needed a rest. So did I. So then he moved on to somewhere else. A phlox. So it's just fun. It's enjoyable to see. So that's all the color pictures for the moment. This picture tells a tale. These are some forget-me-nots that I planted into a pot, into a tray. There's 8 plants in that tray. And it's not a brilliant picture, but the one in the top right-hand corner is very, very yellow and mediocre, and it's not really growing. That one didn't have fertilizer, and all the rest did. And the fertilizer that they had was Osmocote, and we've talked about Osmocote, and you can buy it. I've got some from a greenhouse. I buy it in a 50-pound bag, but you can buy it through Amazon, and a number of people have used it, and it's a big benefit, and it works. Liquid fertilizer also works, Miracle Grow. But then what you also want to do is you want to start your own compost so that you can recycle stuff. And I use this organic compost starter. I bought one of the garden centers. So some of my old grass clippings, some of the stuff that we've cut down, that works. Some of the old leaves that we harvested last year, and we build that up, and then if you're lucky enough, you've got nice big fat juicy earthworms, because they do a really good job. So mix stuff up, put in layers, some of your compost spreading stuff, and you'll turn out and have a nice compost pile for next year. So that's now about twice that size. And that, remember that picture because it comes into the picture, into the story a little bit later. So, anybody know what that is in the front? That plant with all the stalks and so on and so forth. Well, that was a verbena, a nice flowering verbena, having succumbed to the deadly rabbit. So he basically chewed it and annihilated it. So the best thing for that is this deer and rabbit material. So you can get liquid material, which you have to spray on every time it rains, then you have to repeat. But then there's, we encountered as well, or we found there's a granular material. And the granular material sort of does work because that verbena hasn't been attacked by the rabbit ever since. So something to think about for next year. On your sensitive plants, you can, sprinkle that stuff around. So the ever-dreaded weeds. Here we mention the word volunteer again. Feel free, walk around the properties in the town, and they're your property as well as everybody else's. And if you see a weed, don't feel bashful, pull it, get rid of it. There is a problem out here because in all this area, there's a lot of vetch, and it's going to be a challenge to get stuff to grow without being actually mutilated by the vetch. But we've done a reasonably good job. I was digging up some weeds the other day, so the water system was beginning to work as well. So the colour's still there. And using my knee pad that Nancy happily donated to me, because one day she saw me kneeling on concrete and she says, "You shouldn't be doing that. Here, take this, because I can't use it anymore." So I brought my kneeling pad with me. So pulling that up, but when I was doing that, and this area here was a whole lot bad, whole lot worse earlier on in the year. Sarah and Robin got on their hands and knees and they weeded all this area as well. And lo and behold, they left some plants in the middle, milkweed, thinking, well, maybe there'll be some monarch butterflies. Yeah, I haven't in my sister-in-law's garden been so accommodating, and I've pulled milkweed out. Maybe I shouldn't be. But anyhow, so when I looked at the milkweed, lo and behold, hey, monarch butterfly larvae, caterpillar. And he's chewing away. And it's probably going to be dark when you go outside, but you can always come back here. And these plants are now fairly well stripped. And there you go. It's decapitated. There's a couple of monarch caterpillars down near the bottom, but they're happy, and we'll see what develops. So somewhere else on another one, there's two of them, one at the bottom and one at the top. One day I come up here in the middle of the afternoon and couldn't find anything. I thought, oh, they're gone. But they're like everybody else. They don't like the heat of the sun and all the rest of it. So they go down and they rest at the bottom of the plant, and then they come back up late in the day or at night. So we'll see what happens further on down the line. So what else? Anybody know what those are? Those are the dreaded aphids on the milkweed as well. But all is not lost, because on another plant I saw some ladybugs. So they will eat the aphids, or they produce larvae, and they eat the aphids, and we'll come back to that one in a minute or two. So it's amazing what you see when you actually look. There it is. It's getting ready to have its dinner. And so we went on vacation a couple of years ago. Wellfleet State Park, out by the water, and we walked out towards the water, and I kept my eyes open, and on a couple of bushes, lo and behold, I saw some aphids, and then I saw some ladybugs. And then when I looked a little bit closer, and if you can see them right in the middle, Sarah, there's a ladybug larva, one there and another one in the middle. Yep, that's it. Yep. And those are the ones that really sort of eat the aphids. And coming in here tonight, I looked, and I showed Scott, and I showed Robin, and there'll probably be something on Facebook later on, because one side of the plant, there's no aphids on at all. There's scales and so on and so forth, and the larvae are sort of working their way over to the other side. So that's called biological control, and we've been working with biological control in the greenhouse for about the last 10 or 15 years, and 80% of the greenhouses in the United States and Canada are working with biological control. So get away from chemicals and nasty stuff. More about that in a minute. So there's the ladybugs, and here's another picture. We're still on pests. Anybody know what this is? The plant is verbena, and the leaves are all speckled and chewed by little thrips, which are nasty little insects which damage your plants. And it's more serious, big time serious in the greenhouse, because if you're trying to grow a quality plant and it's all scarred and damaged, it's not going to happen. So that I saw recently around in a garden center. So if you see plants like that, don't buy them, because you're only creating a problem. You're only bringing a problem in. So coming through Canada on our way home, on our road trip, we stopped in by a greenhouse, a friend that through my sort of biological mentor in Canada, and I've had some consultations and so on and so forth with him, but he's growing cut gerbera, and he's changing things over a little bit and getting out of specific cut gerbera, but when you're growing cut gerbera flowers, they have to be perfect, like that. You can imagine, move the verbena scarred leaves into those petals, and you've got a totally unsaleable product. So it's important that the greenhouse does the right thing. Yeah, you can go and spray a lot and all the rest of it, but so many different chemicals are used and they begin to not work. Insects build up resistance. So then we get on to we're growing banker plants. So this is maybe a subject for another exercise, because otherwise if we start talking about that too much tonight, we'll never get home. But that's mullein on the right-hand side, lobularia. Remember, it was in some of our plant material on our deck, and peppers. So all of these things are tailored for various different products, aureus and dicyphus. More mullein, and these plants are being grown for the industry, which you'll see in a minute or two. But mullein is one of these plants that maybe sort of just appears in your garden, like that one. Garden club members will know that appeared in Anne McDougall's garden, and it began to grow, and it got bigger. Jack and the Beanstalk bigger, and Anne said, well, why is it growing so fast? Well, because her impatiens down at the bottom weren't doing very well. Somebody put some Osmocote on them. And lo and behold, it liked it, and they grew. And at the end of the day, all the flowers, the bees love it, but all the flowers then turn into seeds, and it was even bigger than Anne. Anne unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight because she's got some issues with one of her eyes, but I don't want this in my garden, was the comment. So Robin to the rescue, carefully cleared all the seeds, because there's millions of seeds in this. Yeah, they'll maybe grow in the ground next year, but you can always pull some of them out. But these seeds will be available through the garden club next spring for anybody who wants them. What has to happen with those is they have to be stratified, they have to be vernalized, they have to go into a freezer for about 4 months, and then you'll actually get the seeds to germinate. So we learned that to our cost in the greenhouse. When I went to purchase, we were growing some mullein for trade people years ago, and I went to buy some more seed. Some of the seed producing people said, yeah, we got some. When did you get it? Oh, just a short while ago. What's its history? Well, it just come off the plant. No, not going to work. It needs to be stratified for about 4 months. So it's in the freezer and it'll work. So Robin will have a supply of seed next spring. That little bug on the leaf is a Dicyphus. That's a biological insect. It's a generalist predator. It goes after whitefly, and it really does a good job. These things fly around in the fields. We've had them in our perennial fields up at the greenhouse, and so it's one of those things that works. Now, the larger greenhouses, tomato greenhouse, where my mentor, Ron Valentin, is in charge of all the biological control in these greenhouses. There's mullein, there's lobularia, all the way through, planted on separate watering systems to make sure that it's watered correctly and not killed. And this is how we're growing your tomatoes that you're going to be buying in the stores. And this little video, this is a 30-acre greenhouse, all under one roof. And it goes on and on and on. They're banker plants for the beneficials, correct, Sarah? Yep. Dicyphus on the mullein and aureus on the lobularia or other beneficial insects, and it basically works. So, yeah, time to breathe. Enjoy the color. So, how can we get the benefit of these when the weather turns nasty? So you go through and you cut some and you bring them inside. So you can make yourself some arrangements, play around. Some varieties you'll learn they last longer than others, but it works. That's a ligularia and some coral bells. Just something nice and simple, but those ligularia, the bees love those. They get drunk on nectar on those. Again, nice clean phlox. Just mix and match. Take care. When we were in Michigan, Grand Haven, we encountered some of these plantings all the way round the town. Think Paxton, think boring, think where we can go from here. Travis maybe has some plans afoot to improve the berms and pathways and so on the common. So maybe that could be us one day. Coming through Canada on the roads, all the centre reservations in one or two of the towns. Just plant after plant after plant. So it brightens the traffic jam up big time. No, we didn't get out and count how many bees there were. Wasn't allowed. But we drove by and we looked at sort of what else we could see. And big planters, again, very nice. Again, the idea is that we can get some of these planters up on the common when the pathways are redone. So they're not just going to happen by themselves. Everybody's a volunteer, right? So where are we with colour generally round Paxton? Some worked. The reason that the maple trees at the other end of the common have actually got some plants in them is because when Travis got me some compost for the memorial in the middle, we had far too much. So what if we use our 61% and go somewhere else. So yeah, go ahead. So there we did. Change of scene. Different varieties. There's daylilies at the back of that Korean Vietnam memorial that they're going to have to come out because you can't see the inscription on it. But anyhow, so at least there was something there. So the old bushes that were in front of the World War I memorial, which were obliterating the memorial, Travis pulled them out. So we changed that. So that bed is in its infancy as well. So we'll see what happens to that one. Colour. There's 4 nepeta around that monument. Catmint. And they were all exactly the same size when they were planted. But the 2 at the front, that side, are bigger than the ones at the back because they get more sun. Wonderful. Sunlight makes a big difference. So you'll notice right in the middle, in between the coreopsis, Sarah, where we've got a timer on our soaker hose. Thank you. So that way we've eliminated a lot of the hand watering from where we were last year. So we've written up a sheet of how to be a volunteer and how to hand water. So the system works. And then the senior centre, well, we look terrible. What can you do for us? So that berm was redone by Travis as well, and he filled that with some of the nice compost. Left me a new area to work with. So planted that up, and that's been looked after one of our garden club ladies as well, or lady from the senior centre, Donna Marie, and that does well too. Different area by the senior centre. It's in the shade. Some of the plants work, some of the plants don't. There's some little iris along the front which are doing quite well now. They came from Anne McDougall's garden. Other plants came from other people's garden or my garden. So it's just making the place look pretty. And then Darlene, I got into conversation with Darlene once and said, how would you like your bank to look a little bit pretty? And she said, oh, what can we do to make that happen? So she and I negotiated, and so now people can sit and have their sandwiches outside and enjoy some beauty when they go and purchase at the deli. Some various different plants on the front, so that looks colourful as well. So it's all the attempt to just play around and make things happen. Our garden looks quite nice with all the astilbe. Perennials again, maybe in the same position from year to year. I don't just move stuff around just because I love moving stuff around. But you see what works and what doesn't work. But mainly with perennials, but if you use some annuals as well, then you can increase the colour so that when the astilbe flowers go, you've got a little bit of colour sort of dotted in here and there. So those are some seed impatiens, and in another area some more seed impatiens, and that sort of works quite well. So every so often it'll rain, and I get like a proverbial bear with a sore head because I can't get out into the garden. So a couple of Fridays ago when it rained, everybody remember when it really rained one Friday, something moved in the back garden, right in the middle. Can you pick it out, Sarah?
I think I can.
Is a hawk.
Oh, wait, a hawk? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, right there.
And he just flew up into the the bushes. So Ellen and I spent the next 3/4 of an hour looking through binoculars, trying to take photographs, seeing what would happen, when is he going to move, what's going to happen. So I got him through the binoculars on my iPhone, looking at me and saying, "What are you looking at?" Next one. Still there. Oh, no, there he's still there. Go on. Yep. So in the corner of our yard, we have a culvert, and certain people have been round to visit through the garden tour, and there's water, and we like to go down and have a look at the frogs and see how many frogs we can count. And then the frogs, our small frogs, are all over the garden. Well, because there weren't any birds around, because we had to take the feeders down because of the bears, the hawk was hungry. So Ellen was watching studiously from the bedroom. Oh, he's moved. He's flown down into the culvert. So what happens next? He comes back with a frog. So there he is on top of my compost pile, having his lunch. It's nature. We have to enjoy it. So that's the way things are. So make some more arrangements, share the wealth, and even spread it around to your favorite sister-in-law, because that's on her fireplace, and we all enjoy it, and that's the end of the story. So any questions? Maybe I've rambled a lot. Hopefully it's been interesting.
Do you use mulch in your own gardens, in your yard? I couldn't tell if you had any mulch.
I try not to, but I'm using it in some cases where I know I'm not going to sort of move stuff around too much. But it's best if you can use your own compost, because if the mulch is not properly composted, it will eat up the nitrogen that's in the ground, and we have that problem in the greenhouse.
Should be removed every spring or every
Yeah,
you won't really rake it out.
yeah, rake it out and start again. It depends. It's personal preference. I mean, some people like brown mulch. My sister-in-law likes now black mulch, and it makes a big difference. It just depends on sort of what works. Helps to keep the weeds down, certainly. Yep.
Do you prefer open composting to bins?
Bins are sort of limiting to some extent, because I like to do things in big lots. I mean, there's a lot of material. When we cut stuff back in the fall, and there's a lot of leaves and so on, I mean, you'd have bins upon bins upon bins, and you know it's a lot of expense. But if you've got the open ground, it's best to do it sort of straight out in the open. Maybe the piles are a little bit unsightly at times, but they don't last very long because you're going to use them and spread them around the garden the next year or the year after.
I was just curious, what you said when you first moved and it was kind of warm, you planted close to December or whatever, and then it got cold. Those plants survived okay?
Oh yeah, yep, they're there. Once, I mean, that's what perennials do. They as long as you've got them in the ground, the roots survive. I mean, if you take greenhouse, if you take a house plant and put it outside, it's toast. It's not going to survive. But perennials do. I mean, you know, you saw the coral bells. They survive through the wintertime. So there, it can be. I mean, was this fall is a good time for planting? Fall, yes. Spring, you can divide, you can split, you can spread stuff around. if the ground is in the right condition for planting, do it. You can't plant too late into the spring because you're going to damage the root system. The plant has already started to grow. So as long as the plant is in its dormancy or sort of semi-dormancy stage, and it's always good to make the area or the plants wet, that you're going to, if you're going to dig something up, if you're going to split something up, make it wet first of all before you try to work on it and spread it around, because the plants want to be happy. Some people recommend going round and watering your garden in the fall so that the plants are well moistened and well nourished before they're ready to go into winter. Well, maybe yes, maybe no. Hopefully we get enough rain to do that. But limit stress. None of us like stress. So think of the plants how they want to be.
How often do you feed them?
When they look like they need feed. It depends. What I've done, apart from using the compost, I've gone through in the springtime and I've sprinkled are different. We found out recently that the blue salvia was beginning to be yellow, sort of the color of your shirt, Ronnie. And I thought, okay, come on, where's the gardener here? So I started to do some liquid feeding, and lo and behold, it's got green again. So, you're watering all the time, so you're leaching stuff out. So if the plant is nice and green and shiny leaves and looking at you and saying, I'm happy, you don't need to feed.
Do you turn your outdoor compost, or do you just stack on top and take them?
I'm stacking on top, Rachel, and leaving it for long enough. If you put the material in, you can do. If I had the time and effort and felt like I needed some exercise, I probably would turn it. But once you start, you got to sort of do the whole thing. But if you do it in layers and put some of this material in, it works. Just leave it long enough. Put some soil in the midst, earthworms, and they're doing the turning for you. Patience is a virtue.
Speaking of earthworms, have you run across jumping worms?
No, and I don't want to.
Oh, we have.
Oh, I'm sorry for you.
Yeah, so I was just curious.
Yeah, no,
Any
no, sorry.
information about them?
You're on your own, I'm sorry.
Don't bring any of your potted plants to us.
As you were saying, when you're buying plants now,
Yeah,
you want to check the soil.
yeah. You got to be careful. You got to. We like to think we're good gardeners. My sister-in-law's Calabricoa hanging basket is so much better than what ours is. It gets a lot of sun. We put some fertilizer on it. I could say Jack's is. I worked with Jack's from Peter's. That's a liquid material. Osmocote is a granular material. It's slow release. It's little prills, and it's various. It's got the nutrients, the NPK, plus a lot of minor elements and so on and so forth in it, and it's slow release. So if you put it on your pots, on your plants, every time it waters, they get fed. So it'll last maybe for 6 or 8 weeks. There's different formulations, but check it out. Go onto Amazon. Everything's bought on Amazon these days. But yeah, it works. I even have it on my back of my phone to remind me. Tell people about Osmocote. I don't have shares in the company, but I know that this stuff works.
Do you cover your plants, the perennials and stuff?
In the winter?
Mulch them over, cover them, they just,
No.
because I noticed in the picture they weren't really.
No, they're not. They're not covered. People sometimes in the fall they jump the gun too much. All that plant material that's there if you cut it back before it naturally dies down, all that material, yeah, it might go in your compost heap, but it really wants to go back into the plant. So the rootstock is made better. Maybe I tend to clean stuff off in the fall because I want something to do, maybe, or maybe not. But yeah, there's leaves and there's whatever. It's not completely cleaned, but they're perennials. If they're in the right zone, they'll survive. No, I don't go through and cover stuff up because it's, number one, it's effort. Number two, it's wasted effort. Number three, if there's a lot of surplus material on top, you may get a lot of rot and botrytis and so on and so forth. So just let them be. They're fine. They survive. If you want to know, will other things survive? Leucanthemum, Shasta daisies, astilbes, whatever. I mean, it's just bare. They'll grow when they're ready. I mean, April, maybe you're not going to get much in March. Maybe sometimes we still had our raspberries this year, and last year we had ice and snow on our raspberries on the 12th and 13th of April. Covered, completely covered in ice and snow. And all of a sudden, the weather improves and they grow, and we harvested raspberries about the same time this year as we have done every other year. So, but if you cut stuff back, maybe don't go too low to the ground. You can always go back again and trim it next year. But don't jump the gun. Let stuff die back. And for splitting and transferring stuff and so on and so forth, yeah, maybe in September, early October, you can dig stuff up and move it, but make sure that the area, the plants that you're going to move or deal with, they're well watered and they're in a good condition to be done. And then re-wet stuff, soak the rootstock before you plant it into a new area and give it a good start. When you do split stuff, if you do it early enough when the weather conditions are right, they get a chance to sort of throw out some new roots and they'll start to grow, and then they're more ready for the winter time. But it depends. Everybody's got to make their own choices. I'm not saying one thing is right or the other thing is wrong. It turns out, and it's nice.
What about fertilizing in the fall? Would you advise against that?
I'm not a fall fertilizer, Sarah, to be honest, because if you get it wrong and you put too much on and the plant starts to regrow and then you get a heavy frost, you're sort of screwed. It's like, why did none of our rhododendrons or azaleas flower this year? Number one, it was too dry in the fall. Forsythia. Nobody had flowers on their forsythia. The flowers are formed on this year's wood, and it was too dry in the fall to form properly. And the flowers that did make it on any of those varieties or those species got hammered with the 35 minus degree temperatures in February when they were just beginning to think about burning or going to grow. So hopefully next year it's going to be bountiful. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, don't cut stuff back too late in the fall, because if it does regrow and then the weather turns bad, it's like the poor orchard growers in the wintertime or in the springtime when they get a nice flush of flower and then they get a frost and they're gone. So hopefully it's been somewhat helpful. Thank you all for your attendance and listening, and hopefully I didn't go on for too long. And I would just like to donate this vase of flowers to Robin, because she has been an absolute trooper. This would not have happened apart from her twisting my arm 50 million times. It would not have happened without her. We can only be really, really thankful that we've got Sarah and Robin at the head of the garden club, because it's gone, we've now got 100 plus members. It's gone from strength to full. So thank you very much for your attendance, listening, and if I have to run out the door quick before everybody else, I will. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for attending. We really appreciate it. This is the first of our fall series. Please join us on October 17th for invasive plant management. That will be very exciting. And then also we are having the Greater Worcester Land Trust coming on November 9th. And both of those will be taking place at our library, RML, and they will be recorded events as well, but they will be recorded and aired at a later date. And please be sure to check our website for all the great things we have going. We have a wonderful fundraising campaign happening right now to try and finish off our projects that we've got going on in the town spaces. And then we have our 2024 calendar, thanks to member Michelle Thorne. We're doing pre-orders now. That will be available starting next week. Physical copies, and our note cards are out in the hallways. So thank you all. We hope you have a nice night.
Sorry, one last thing. I've got a lot of books up here that are very good. This Sunset Perennial book, it can be purchased on the Sunset website. There's a wealth of information. Anybody who wants to know anything about perennials is in here. That's about $5 worth. So it's there. There's books up here. If anybody wants to ask any questions after everybody else leaves, feel free. No, I'm not running out the door. I'm here. Thank you. Good night.